I looked it up and I did indeed stay at Trinity one time in Oxford for a summer abroad. Pretty fancy. Anyway, a few of Johnson's definitions must be admitted to be erroneous. Thus, windward and leeward, though directly of opposite meaning, are defined identically the same way, as to which inconsiderable specs it is enough to observe that his preface announces that he was aware there might be many such in so immense a work, nor was he at all disconcerted when an instance was pointed out to him. A lady once asked him how he came to define pastern the knee of a horse. Instead of making an elaborate defense, as she expected, he at once answered, "Ignorance magnum, madame, pure ignorance." His definition of network has been often quoted with sportive malignity as obscuring a thing in itself very plain. But to these frivolous censors no other answer is necessary than that with which we are furnished by his own preface. Quoted parts now. To explain requires the use of terms less abstruse than that which is to be explained, and such terms cannot always be found. For as nothing can be proved but by supposing something intuitively known and evident without proof, so nothing can be defined but by the use of words too plain to admit of definition. Sometimes easier words are changed into harder, as burial into sepulture or interment, dry into desiccative, dryness into siccity or ardity, fit into paroxysm, for the easiest word, whatever it can be, can never be translated into one more easy. He's got a point. He is introducing his own opinions and even prejudice under general definitions of words, while at the same time the original meaning of the words is not explained, as his Tory, Whig, pension, oats, excise, and a few more cannot be fully defended, and must be placed into the account of capriciousness and humorous indulgence. Johnson thus defines excise: a hateful tax levied upon commodities and adjudged not by the common judges of property, but wretches hired by those to whom excise is paid. The commissioners of excise, being offended by the severe reflection, consulted Mr. Murray, then Attorney General, to know whether redress could be legally obtained. I wish to have procured for my readers a copy of the opinion which he gave, and which may now be justly considered as history, but the mysterious secrecy of offices, it seems, would not permit it. I am, however, informed by very good authority that its import was that the passage might be considered as actionable, but that it would be more prudent in the board not to prosecute. Johnson never made the smallest alteration in this passage. We find he still retained his early prejudice against excise, for in the Idler, issue 65, there is the following very extraordinary paragraph. The authenticity of Clarendon's history, though printed with the sanction of one of the first universities of the world, has not an unexpected manuscript been happily discovered, would, with the help of factious credulity, have been brought into question by the two lowest of all human beings, a scribbler for a party and a commissioner of excise. The persons to whom he alludes were Mr. John Oddmixon and George Duckett, Esquire. Anyway, talking to me upon this subject, which he, meaning the prejudice he sometimes shows, when we were at Ashbourne in 1777, Johnson mentioned a still stronger instance of the predominance of his private feelings in the composition of this work than any now to be found in it. You know, sir, Lord Gower forsook the old Jacobite interest. When I came to the word renegado, after telling that it meant one who deserts to the enemy, a revolter, I added, sometimes we say a Gower. Thus it went to the press, but the printers had more wit than I, and struck it out. Let it, however, be remembered that this indulgence does not display itself only in sarcasm towards others, but sometimes in playful allusion to the notions commonly entertained of his own laborious task. Thus, Grub Street, the name of a street in London much inhabited by writers of small histories, dictionaries, and temporary poems, whence any means production is called Grub Street. Lexicographer, a writer of dictionaries, a harmless drudge. At the times when he was concluding his very eloquent preface, Johnson's mind appeared to have been in such a state of depression that we cannot contemplate without wonder the vigorous and splendid thoughts which so highly distinguished that performance. "I," says Johnson, "may surely be contented without the praise of perfection, which if I could obtain in the gloom of solitude, what would it avail me? I have protracted my work till most of those whom I wish to please have sunk into the grave, and success and miscarriages are empty sounds. I therefore dismiss it with frigid tranquillity, having little to fear or hope from censure or from praise." Bleak. That this indifference was rather a temporary than an habitual feeling appears, I think, from his letter to Mr. Wharton, and however he may have been affected for the moment, certain it is that the honors which his great work procured him, both at home and abroad, were very grateful to him. His friend, the Earl of Cork and Orrery, being at Florence, presented it to the Accademia della Crusca. That academy sent Johnson their Vocabulario, and the French Academy sent him their Dictionnaire. I don't know. That's not what a French person sounds like. Dictionnaire. I can't do French now. I can't think. Which Mr. Langton had the pleasure to convey to him. Oui. It must undoubtedly seem strange that the conclusion of his preface should be expressed in terms so desponding, when it is considered that the author was then only in his 46th year. Well, I'm younger than that, and I'm despondent. But we must ascribe its gloom to that miserable dejection of spirits to which he was constitutionally subject, and which was aggravated by the death of his wife 2 years before. I have heard it ingeniously observed by a lady of rank and elegance that his melancholy was then at its meridian. It pleased God to grant him almost 30 years of life after this time, and once, when he was in a placid frame of mind, he was obliged to own to me that he had enjoyed happier days, and had had many more friends since that gloomy hour than before. Well, that's good. Better times ahead, perhaps. It is a sad saying that most of those whom he wished to please had sunk into the grave, and his caste at 45 was singularly unhappy, unless the circle of his friends was very narrow. I have often thought that as longevity is generally desired, and I believe generally expected, it would be wise to be continually adding to the numbers of our friends, that the loss of some may be supplied by others. Friendship, the wine of life, should, like a well-stocked cellar, be thus continually renewed. That's good. Good quote there. And it is consolatory to think that although we can seldom add what will equal the generous first growths of our youth, yet friendship becomes insensibly old in much less time than is commonly imagined, and not many years are required to make it very mellow and pleasant. Warmth will, no doubt, make it a considerable difference. Men of affectionate temper and brightly fancy will coalesce a great deal sooner than those who are cold and dull. The proposition which I have now endeavored to illustrate was, at a subsequent period of his life, the opinion of Johnson himself. He said to Sir Joshua Reynolds, "If a man does not make new acquaintance as he advances through life, he will soon find himself left alone. A man, sir, should keep his friendships in constant repair." The celebrated Mr. Wilkes, whose notions and habits of life were very opposite to this, but who was ever eminent for literature and vivacity, sallied forth from a little jet de spirit upon the following passage in his Grammar of the English Tongue, prefixed to the dictionary. H seldom, perhaps never, begins any but the first syllable. In an essay printed in the Public Advertiser, this lively writer enumerated many instances in opposition to this remark. For example, the author of this observation must be a man of a quick apprehension, notice what he did there, and of a most comprehensive genius. The position is undoubtedly expressed with too much latitude. This light sally, we must suppose, made no great impression on our lexicographer, for we find that he did not alter the passage till many years afterwards. In fact, in the fourth edition, published in 1733, he left out the words "perhaps never" and added the following paragraph. It sometimes begins a middle or first syllable in a words compounded as blockhead or derived from the Latin as comprehended. He had the pleasure of being treated in a very different manner by his old pupil Mr. Garrick in the following complimentary epigram. Get ready for some bad poetry again from our man Garrick. On Johnson's Dictionary. Talk of war with a Briton, he'll boldly advance. That one English soldier will beat 10 of France. Would we alter the boast from the sword to the pen, our odds are still greater our men. In the deep mines of science, though Frenchmen may toil, can their strength be compared to Locke, Newton, and Boyle? Let them rally their heroes, send forth all their powers, their versemen and prosemen, then match them with ours. First Shakespeare and Milton, like gods in the fight, have put their whole drama and epic to flight. In satires, epistles, and odes, would they cope? Their numbers retreat before Dryden and Pope. And Johnson, well armed like a hero of yore, has beat forth the French, and will beat 40 more. The number of the French Academy employed in setting their language was quite a big number, I guess. 40 versus Johnson. One Englishman to do what 40 Frenchmen could do. He's got you there, Garrick. You got them there. Johnson this year gave at once a proof of his benevolence, quickness of apprehension, and admirable art of composition in the assistance which he gave to Mr. Zachariah Williams, father of the blind lady whom he had humanely received under his roof. Mr. Williams had followed the profession of physic or psychic, I can't remember still, in Wales. Probably physic, he's probably not a psychic. But having a very strong propensity to the study of natural philosophy, had made many ingenious advances towards a discovery of the longitude and repaired to London in hopes of obtaining the great parliamentary reward. So is this the guy who invented longitude, or discovered longitude? It just says many ingenious advances towards a discovery of the longitude. I don't know what that means. Anyway, he failed of success, but Johnson, having made himself master of his principles and experiments, wrote for him a pamphlet published in quarto with the following title: An account of an attempt to ascertain the longitude at sea by an exact theory of the variation of the magnetical needle, with a table of the variations of the most remarkable cities in Europe from the year 1660 to 1680. To diffuse it more extensively, it was accompanied with an Italian translation on the opposite page, what it is supposed was the work of Signor Baretti, an Italian of considerable literature, who, having come to England a few years before, had been employed in the capacity both of a language master and an author, and formed an intimacy with Dr. Johnson. This pamphlet Johnson presented to the Bodleian Library. On a blank leaf of it is pasted a paragraph cut out of the newspaper obtaining an account of the death and character of Williams, plainly written by Johnson. I'm getting deja vu like I've read this before. If you're curious what he wrote in that newspaper, on Saturday the 12th, about 12 at night, died Mr. Zechariah Williams in his 83rd year, after an illness of 8 months, in full possession of his mental faculties. He has been long known to philosophers and seamen for his skill in magnetism, and his proposal to ascertain the longitude by a peculiar system of the variation of the compass. He was a man of industry indefatigable, another word I have trouble pronouncing, of conversation inoffensive, patient of adversity and disease, eminently sober, temperate, and pious, and worthy to have ended life with better fortune. That's nice. In July this year, 1755, excuse me, Johnson had formed some scheme of mental improvement, the particular purpose of which does not appear. But we find in his Prayers and Meditations, page 25, a prayer entitled, On the Study of Philosophy as an Instrument of Living, and after it follows a note, this study was not pursued. On the 13th of the same month, he wrote in his journal the following scheme of life for Sunday. Oh, I think I've seen this part before. Having lived as he with tenderness of conscience expresses... Let me start this again. Having lived, Boswell aside here, as he with tenderness of conscience expresses himself, not without an habitual reverence for the Sabbath, yet without the attention to its religious duties which Christianity requires. Number 1, to rise early, and in order to do it, to go to sleep early on Saturday. Number 2, to use some extraordinary devotion in the morning. Number 3, to examine the tenor of my life, and particularly the last week, and to mark my advances in religion or recession from it. From number 4, to read the Scripture methodically with such helps as are at hand. Number 5, to go to church twice. Wow. Number 6, to read books of divinity, either speculative or practical. Number 7, to instruct my family. And number 8, to wear off by meditation any worldly soil contracted in the week. Pretty stringent thing. No wonder he didn't do it. Anyway, we're up to his 47th year now, 1756. In 1756, Johnson found that the great fame of his dictionary had not set him above the necessity of making provisions for the day that was passing over him. No royal or noble patron extended a magnificent hand to give independence to the man who had conferred stability on the language of his country. We may feel indignant that there should have been such unworthy neglect, but we must at the same time congratulate ourselves when we consider that to this very neglect, operating to rouse the natural indolence of his constitution, we owe many valuable productions, which otherwise perhaps might never have appeared. He had spent, during the progress of the work, the money for which he had contracted to write his dictionary. We have seen that the reward of his labor was only £1,575, and when the expense of amanuensis, that's a secretary and paper, and other articles are deducted, his clear profit was very inconsiderable. I once said to him, "I am sorry, sir, you did not get more from your dictionary." His answer was, "I am sorry too, but it was very well. The booksellers are generous, liberal-minded men." He, upon all occasion, did ample justice to their character in this respect. He considered them as the patrons of literature, and indeed, although they have eventually been considerable gainers by his dictionary, it is to them that we owe it having been undertaken and carried through at the risk of great expense, for they were not absolutely sure of being indemnified. That's it for Boswell for today. Bye from Boswell.